This is a design that came from a customer through a DXF file and kind of identified an issue, particularly for en route to import, but also just from a design perspective that I thought I would just talk a little bit about the DXF side of it, or the AutoCAD side of it, and then how it can be created in AutoCAD in order to be more amenable to toolpathing and all of that once it comes into en route. So I'm going to switch over to AutoCAD, and here you see the design as it was created in AutoCAD, and basically what it is it uses arrays, and arrays are pretty neat objects, a way to have relatively simple original geometry and then repeat that geometry into a pattern based on spacing and rows and columns and all that. And so if I select this, you see that AutoCAD recognizes it as an array, and if I click on this, then I can actually change the number of columns. This is what's called a rectangular array, or I can type in the number of columns. So let's say I wanted 100 columns. I can just type that in, and it'll create that. In this case, this was created as a rectangular array with just one row, so vertically one row, and a whole bunch of columns. And then the original geometry is actually also arrays. So there's two arrays that were copied in arrays, and so you get arrays of arrays. And when this exports, it exports as blocks, which en route imports as groups. And so that was sort of the issue bringing it into en route, is we've got an issue when we're sorting the groups that is sort of time consuming, and so that was an issue with the way that we dealt with the groups. But also when you create geometry like this, and this was created, if I zoom in on it, the original geometry was created as essentially two groups of line segments. So that line, that line, that line, and that line were one, and then there's a line here, a line here, line here, and a line here, and then those are repeated, and those repeated in an array, those are repeated in a way that makes them they're stacked into rows, and then those are arrays that are then repeated as arrays in the columns. And so it's kind of the arrays of arrays. And so anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to back up a little bit with this object, and I'm going to bring this down to just one column, and there you sort of see what it is. And then I'm going to explode it, so I can type in explode here, and so now I have two objects. And so I have this object and this object, and those are both arrays also. So one of the things that I want to do is I want to move this array over, and I'll show you why in a second, so I can separate them, so I can identify them separately. And now I'm going to select this array, and I'm going to explode it back to its original objects. And so here you see that these are individual line segments that are repeated. The problem is that when I bring this into en route, with all the grouping and everything, it makes it a little more complicated to select what I want to select. But then ultimately what I have is a whole bunch of line segments, and those line segments, because of the way this array works, those line segments overlap, which makes it difficult for en route to join them together automatically. And so really it would make the whole process simpler in en route if rather than arrays of arrays, if this could be joined together. And so once I have an array like I had here, if I could explode it and then join it, then I could make another array and explode it, and you'll see that when I then send that to en route, it makes the importing process much simpler, and then the objects are already joined together into a polyline that then makes it really amenable to toolpathing. So at this point, if I that's not what I wanted to do. If I select this group of objects and then just type in join, and that's assuming that the height of the array is what I want it to be. And then if I do the same thing with this one, so I want to explode it, and then I want to select the objects and join them into a polyline. So now I have two polylines, and if I zoom in on here, I can select this one, and if I want to move it from there back over to here, so now I have it back in position. So now I have two polylines that aren't arrays, but that will help make the process much simpler in en route. And so now if I select both of these, and I'm going to create an array again like we did before, and it's going to be rectangular, and I want to have the spacing at 0.2598, and because that makes them kind of overlap each other just right, and that's okay. I'm only going to have one row, and then I also want to define the number of columns, and let's say I want to have 100 columns, and that spacing is correct, and then I can click exit. So now I'm out of the array thing, and so now I've got this array that I've created essentially just like I did before, but in this case it's an array of polylines. It's sort of a single depth array, and so now if I explode this before I export it, now I'm back to individual polylines. So now if I do a save as, and I can just save it as a drawing file, and I'm going to call it polylines 2. I already did one once, so I save it as polylines. So now if I go into en route, and I'm going to get out of this drawing, create a new one, and say import, and I'm going to import it as a DWG, and that polylines 2 that I just created, one of the things that you see is it imports quickly, so it just took a second or two to import. And the other nice part is the objects, because they're polylines, they're ready to toolpath. They're all joined together as polylines in the way that I think the user originally wanted to toolpath them. And so now it's easy enough to apply an engraving toolpath to it, or whatever. I don't know how the toolpaths wanted to be created, but you can see that they select quickly, and if I put an engrave on it, and let's say I want to use a conic maybe, and click apply, toolpaths quickly. So by exploding the array in AutoCAD, but also by doing it in a way where I maintain the polylines, or I create polylines so that when they come into en route, they're polylines, then it really makes the whole thing really simple and quick to create in AutoCAD using the array function, which is a super nice function, but then at the same time being able to bring it into en route. And if you wanted to fill a full sheet with that, it's just a question then of sort of figuring out how tall you want it to be when you create that original array, and then how many columns you want when you create the second array, then explode it back to the polylines, export it, or save it essentially, and then import it into en route. and you're ready to go toolpathing wise in a way that's going to be significantly more efficient than any other way, and particularly the individual line segments isn't practical. And so this is a way that makes it possible to do it quickly and efficiently. And then one of the things we have to work on is to figure out how we can recognize those nested blocks that in the arrays, the way they're saved in the AutoCAD file structure, and be able to import it more quickly than we can now. So that's something for us to work on. But in the meantime, you do have a kind of a nice solution for getting that type of a design over to en route in a real efficient way. So thanks, and we'll go on to the next thing.